Chapter 7. Rescue. Sophie, Freddie and their friends had stayed up as long as they had dared in the joint common room. John Smale, a Gryffindor prefect, had politely asked them to go to their dorms. Then he had ordered them. Then he had told them all to bugger off when you're told. Freddie wriggled down under his bedcovers. Xander had followed him into the Hufflepuff common room. After warning Xander not to betray the secrets of the Hufflepuff basement, Freddie let Xander into his dormitory. The whole of the fourth year knew Xander well. Anyone who went to the joint common room would have met Xander, and Elsa, Sophie's cat. Freddie's dormmates had thoroughly petted Xander. In recompense, Freddie lifted his bedding to let the cat in. Xander rubbed his head against Freddie's arm for a while. After that, he assumed the classic spooning position, with his back against the boy's chest. Freddie lay awake on his side for a while, with the bed curtains closed and his one tip glowing as a nightlight. He told himself he was planning, but he was fretting and he knew it. It was not in his nature to worry, yet he had been doing it all evening. He was exhausted.
"Well, Xander," he whispered, "I've tried thinking and it doesn't work. Let's go to sleep and see if anything clever pops into our heads in the morning. That happens sometimes."
Xander, though sceptical of this as a method of planning rescues, purred his approval at the suggestion of sleep. Freddie liked sleep, as much for the dreams as for the feeling of being refreshed in the morning. He had a good dream life. He would be with friends and family, and everyone would be happy and harmonious. It didn't surprise him to find he was sitting on a sunny grass slope with Lydia. He was only a little surprised to see she was scowling at him.
"About time," she grumbled. "I've been waiting ages for you. What time is it?" "It's a dream," Freddie chirped. "It can be whatever time we want it to be."
"What time is it in real life, you complete garnish?" she retorted. He shrugged. "I don't know. I'm asleep. Must be midnight at least. Maybe it's nearly morning. They say you dream just before you wake up."
"What day?"
"Tomorrow. Or today now," Freddie said. "The morning after the sorting ceremony, that is." Lydia's image looked amazed.
"It's not even a day since it captured me."
"No, not yet," said Freddie, then frowned.
"Is this a dream or what, chick?"
Lydia's face managed a brief smile.
"It's a dream. I'm just not sure whose dream. What do you see around us?"
Freddie turned to look.
"Well, we're on a grassy hillside, and it's a sunny day. There's a valley with a meadow in front of us and trees behind you up the slope, and the birds are singing, but they sound a bit weird, like they're singing the same little bit over and over. And there's—"
"Yeah, it's the same place I see," Lydia confirmed. "I think we're in the Watcher's dream. I feel like I've been here for a week."
"Well, it's a nice enough place," Freddie smiled. "You should be glad he gave you such a lovely valley. Those flowers are pretty."
"Sod off. It's bloody torture. He's making time drag. It's always sunny, so I can't sleep. There's nowhere to go and nothing to do." After a pause, she sighed. "Sorry if I'm grumpy. I haven't slept."
"But if you're dreaming, aren't you asleep anyway?" Freddie asked.
Lydia nodded. "I know what you mean. I don't quite feel tired, more like bored. The only other place to go is up to the ruin at the top of the hill. He wants me to go there to look in his eyes, and you know what Ambrose said about that?"
Freddie grimaced. "Yeah, I've got some bad news about Ambrose, babes."
Lydia sighed. "I know. I've spoken to him. He said you'd tried to get him to help and he'd refused. He refused me too, to my face. Well, not my face, it was here. So I guess he refused me to my mind's eye or something."
"Did he say anything, give you a clue?" Freddie asked.
"He said the Death Eaters had taken me to a house in Bristol, and that they'd surrounded me with magic he and I can't get through. What did he tell you?"
"Same," said Freddie. "He said you'd have to solve the problem using your intellect and—" Something else beginning with in. Sorry, I forget.
Lydia smiled properly for the first time.
It's all right, Fredster. I'm so happy to have you here with me.
Me too, babes, Freddie grinned.
Ooh, ingenuity, maybe. Or inventiveness.
Lydia shrugged.
Same thing, really. He told me to remember all those things that make me stronger. That's how I thought of contacting you through a dream. You make me stronger, Freddie. You and Soph and Xander and all our friends as well.
Oh, babes, we love you too, said Freddie, and he leaned towards her to hug her. In that moment, that hug, they created a memory and a bond which stayed with them both for the rest of their lives. In hugging, within that alien dream and at that time of direst need, they pressed part of their souls into each other's.
Soph, Freddie hissed. Sophie, come on. Get up and get some clothes on. We've got to go.
Sophie sat up and blinked until she could see. Freddie was kneeling on top of her bed, Xander standing beside him. Freddie's wand was glowing, allowing her to see.
What? She began to ask. We're going to Bristol to find Lydia and help her escape, Freddie explained in a whisper. Come on. I can't get dressed with you watching, she hissed. We'll turn the other way, Freddie said.
Xander was already at the far end of the bed, facing away from her. Freddie joined him. Sophie took off the silky sleep hood Ambrose had given her for Christmas. She smiled, knowing that her hair would be perfect. It had been every day since Boxing Day morning, thanks to the hood. As she grabbed her muggle clothes and dressed, she wondered about getting the hairbrush, Lydia's Christmas gift from Ambrose. It didn't take her long to realise there were other priorities. As she pulled on her shoes, she asked,
How are we going to get to Bristol, Freddie?
Freddie grinned.
Same way we got here, babes. Xander is no ordinary cat, and I am no ordinary spoon.
Sophie smiled, remembering her insult to Freddie on the train.
No, you aren't. Come on then, Super Spoon. Do you know where we're going? All I know is that it's a house in Bristol, but I think Xander might be able to hunt it down when we get there.
Bristol is not a small city. They had arrived around 1 a.m. and had spent nearly 2 hours following Xander. The cat had stridden onwards the whole time, never distracted from his purpose. They had started in the suburbs and had now crossed the city centre and climbed upwards, almost to the Clifton Suspension Bridge. The two humans caught vague glimpses of the bridge silhouetted against the night sky. They were walking down a narrow street and reached a corner. On their left was a small pub, with those old-fashioned bottle-bottom glass windows still popular in Diagon Alley. The street curved away to the right, along the backs of a row of tall townhouses. A wall, pierced at intervals by gates, separated the street from the backyards of the houses. Here and there, trees leaned over the top of the wall. Xander sat down for the first time since they had arrived in the city. He looked this way and that. Freddie crouched down beside him.
What do you think? Freddie whispered to Xander. Are we on to something?
Xander looked him in the eye and gave a single nod. He stood again and slinked along by the wall, stopping at each gate and seeming to listen for something. Several houses further along, he stopped and sat down, staring at the gate.
Is this the...
Sophie began, then stopped. They were standing on a landing outside the door of what was presumably a bedroom. Freddie looked around. Outside the window behind them, he could see the backyards of the houses and the tops of the trees below them. The landing was a few stories above the street level. Sophie tried again.
Is this the place, Xander?
Xander stared back at her, but gave no sign. Freddie leaned close to her and whispered,
I don't think he's sure. Lyd said there's magic around her that she and Ambrose can't break through. I guess it must be the same for Xander.
Sophie cast a little light from her wand onto the doorknob. "Try it," she whispered. Freddie, his wand at the ready, put his fingertips to the wooden doorknob and turned it. It moved. He applied pressure. It didn't open. "Aloha Mora," Sophie breathed. There was a muffled click. Freddie turned and pushed the knob again. The door opened. The two students looked at each other, took a breath, and entered. The room was empty, apart from a single bed surrounded by several tall stands. There was a smell of disinfectant. A figure, slight and blonde, lay on the bed. She was clothed, with a cloak thrown across her to protect her against the worst of the cold. It was Lydia. They moved closer, careful not to let excitement overtake caution. The stands at each corner of the bed were made of carved wood. They looked old, even antique. Atop each one was a crystal. There was another stand at the side of the bed. It was plain tubular steel. At its top was a hook, holding a plastic bag of clear liquid. A tube led down from the bag to Lydia's arm. "It's a drip," Sophie explained in a whisper. "Muggle hospitals use them to keep unconscious patients hydrated and fed. It goes straight into her veins." "How do we get it out so we can take her with us?" Freddie asked. "I don't know," Sophie whispered back. "In the movies, people just pull them out, get up and walk away. There's no blood, even with a hole in their arms." Sophie shrugged at him. "Well, not in the movies. But the movies lie all the time, just to keep things going. Nobody ever has to go to the toilet in the movies, except the audience." "Oh my God," Freddie hissed. "Don't mention toilets. You'll get me thinking about it." "Focus, Freddie," she murmured. "We're here to rescue Lids. Where's Xander?" By their wand light, they could make out a form huddled in the corner nearest the door. Freddie increased his light. Xander was pressing himself back into the corner, squirming, with his ears flat against his head. "What's wrong with him?" Sophie asked. Freddie looked around the room. "I think it's that magic that's trapping Lids. And I think it's coming from the crystals." He pointed to the stands at the corners of the bed. Sophie looked. "Incantatem anciens revelio," she whispered with a wave of her wand. At once, the room filled with coloured lights. Strange bands of colour swirled around the bed, illuminating the walls and ceiling. "Wow," said Freddie. "Where did you learn that?" "Ambrose pointed it out to me in a book once," she said, keeping her voice low. "We were looking for something else. He didn't even say anything. He just pointed to it and went on looking for whatever it was we were supposed to be looking for. I think he knew we'd need it someday. He's done that with a couple of other spells." Freddie nodded. "There's been times when he's told me stuff, and it's like something's trying to stop him, and it really hurts him to say the words. I guess that's why he didn't speak. And this isn't like the normal Revelio. I can see it as well. Usually it's only the caster who gets to see the effect." "Thank you, Professor Freddie," Sophie grumbled. "So what do we do now?" Freddie frowned and chewed the inside of his cheek. "I don't think Lydia or Xander can do anything while that magic's holding them back. We've got to get rid of these crystals and get Lids out of here." "Could we smash them?" Sophie suggested. "Don't know what would happen," Freddie warned. "Could we smash them quietly, or would they explode or something?" Sophie stared at the crystals. "They're surrounding the bed, right? What if we move the two bottom ones up to the top so they're in a line? That way they're not putting their magic round Lids, maybe?" Freddie nodded. "Worth a try. What's the worst that could happen?" He looked at Sophie's face and added, "Okay, don't answer that. But I don't have a better idea, so let's try it." The strands of light between the crystals and around Lydia were slowly fading. Sophie and Freddie took one of the wooden stands each. As they moved them, the lines of light depicting the binding magic moved with them. They struggled against the force of the magic. Lydia's feet twitched. As they moved towards the head of the bed, Lydia stirred and grunted. Xander rose from the corner and moved towards the bed. Reaching the halfway point of their journey, Freddie hissed across the bed at Sophie.
What?
She mouthed.
What do we do about the tubey drippy thing in her arm?
Said Freddie in an urgent whisper.
We'll take it out when we've moved these,
Sophie replied.
I can heal her arm if it bleeds.
Freddie nodded.
Okay.
By the time they had pushed forward, as far as Lydia's shoulders, Xander had jumped on the bed. Freddie wished he had taken his warm winter jacket off. He'd been glad of it crossing the city in the small hours of the morning, but now he was sweating. Pushing the stand against the resistance of the magic was like wading waist-deep through wet sand. Sophie was hardly breathing more than usual, Freddie noticed. He was glad one of them was sporty. The light of the binding magic was faint as they reached the top of the bed. Sophie's revealing spell was ending. The binding spell of the crystals was stronger than ever. Not only did they struggle against the resistance of the magic, but the air bristled with its energy. Lydia was moving, making small noises, but not yet awake. The two top stands were against the wall. Whispering, they agreed to push their stands up to the wall. With no area between the four stands, they supposed, there would be no room for the magic to work its binding. As Freddie pushed the last stand against the wall, Sophie's revealing charm faded from sight. Lydia snorted. Freddie and Sophie heard a buzzing and sensed a tension in the air. Xander sprang forward and wrapped himself around Lydia's head. The room erupted in light and thunderous noise. Lydia jerked up into a seated position, throwing Xander onto her legs. Sophie made a grab for the drip tube. Freddie screamed, his hands still holding the crystal stand. Shouts and the sound of running feet came from the landing outside the room.
The old rectory!
Lydia shouted. Freddie realized he was suddenly alone. At least until three men kicked the door open and ran in,